Every generation has one. For boomers, the JFK assassination. For Xers, the fall of the Berlin Wall. For millennials, it was September the 11th. And now for us, for Gen Z, it's been the COVID-19 pandemic. One event that defines the generation and changes the world. Over the past year, students here at Tennessee Wesleyan have journeyed through this generational event, and what makes the students here so great is how we've come together and responded. While the pandemic spread around the world, we felt safe on our campus, but we never imagined what the next year would look like. Of course, we learned remotely, but we got to reunite on campus in the fall, and we discovered all new ways to do this great thing called college. So many people have played a part in keeping Tennessee Wesleyan running, safe, and a wonderful place to call home. In this series, we invite you to join different campus groups as we reflect on this past year. The conversations are real, unscripted, and highlight just how strong this Bulldog family truly is.
I've thought a little bit about what it was like at the time, and it was interesting. We had a friend and a colleague who was visiting our house during this, and their college was shutting down, and there were lots of memos going out, and they had a task force and all kinds of things like that, and she was telling me about it. And I remember distinctly thinking, gosh, what is going on? Why are they reacting so strongly? And at the time, of course, we didn't know that it was going to take a year for this thing to, or more, to kind of work its way out. And just the whole idea that we were up against something that none of us had ever had any experience. We had lots of choices to make. Were we going to be really firm? Were we going to try to be a little bit, just urge folks to do things? Are we going to require things? Just all kinds of decisions that were new to us and quite complicated. And overall, I'm just really proud of the decisions we made, and we were pretty thoughtful. I thought we worked well as a team. And then the other thing for me is just how students responded, which we didn't know that either. Were they going to push back? These are all new, different things that we were asking them to do, and they were pretty terrific as well. And then the final thing I'd say is that the one thing that, as a leader, you're worried about is this going to damage the institution? And it's already challenging enough to operate and to compete and to do the important work we have to do. And was this going to be something that was going to hurt us significantly? And that was unknown as well.
Yeah, for me, the news had broke about, we started hearing cases overseas, and we were getting ready to go on spring break with students to Nicaragua. And I remember just sort of jokingly, I doze off on planes and anywhere else I'm traveling if I'm not the driver, but I remember dozing off on the plane, and we had just left Miami, and I had this coughing attack and thinking, I sort of panicked, wondered what everybody was going to think. And then when we got to Nicaragua, the airports actually had screening temperatures. So they actually had the thermal temperature checks there before we went in. So it was one of those, they were there and sort of manning it and letting you go by. But by the time we got home, that next week, all of a sudden this thing had really ramped up. You guys had met, I think, just sort of preliminary discussion the week before offices sort of took the 2 days off and had some preliminary discussions. And so when I walked back, I was like, man, you guys are thinking something different. I was just here and it was no big deal. I came into Miami, nobody's checking anything when we came back. But we had been sort of disconnected from the news for that 1 week, and a transformation had really taken place throughout the country within that 1 week period. So when we started having discussions on campus, I was having to play catch up and get into a whole different mind shift, because what I left in the States versus what we came back to was a whole different world.
So. Yeah, it moved fast. I mean, that's one of the things that I remember is, we're having all these conversations about what if, and within a matter of hours, it shifted to how, not what if, but how. And I just remember these conversations amongst the leadership and the group that Dr. Knowles put together, and it was always about, what is the right time for Tennessee Wesleyan, and how do we do it, and how do we keep our people safe, which I appreciate, because the concerns are always there. You know, what does this mean for the institution, and how is it going to affect the institution's mission to keep going? But I appreciated the focus on keeping people safe, and I think we made the decision in the right time and at the right pace. I remember lots of conversations with Scott about, you know, feeling like we had waited maybe a little longer than some schools to make some critical decisions, but it seemed like every time we made those, it was sort of in the right time for Tennessee Wesleyan.
Right.
And a lot of that had to do with the focus on doing what's right and keeping our people safe and keeping our students safe, but also serving them. And so I appreciated that.
One of the things that was really helpful, and I think it was to all of us, was the idea that our colleagues at other institutions were on listservs, and we kind of, as a community, were making decisions together. And so there was some reassurance coming from other schools that they were doing the same thing, and some were being a little bit more rigid or whatnot. But that was a lot of comfort, I thought, that in those early stages.
I was going to say, I think one of the first times that I really remember COVID being mentioned was in a committee meeting we had, an endowment committee meeting back in January, and the discussion of how could that affect the world and the economy. But it seemed so far away because it was in other countries, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. Just literally, it seemed like in a few days we started talking about it, trying to think of how were we going to plan. And it was truly how do you plan for something you've never done before? Or how is this going to affect people? And I can truly say I don't think anyone here, everyone was thinking, how do we protect our faculty, our staff, but more important, our students? How do we do the best thing? And how do we make sure those students who have nowhere to go still have a home? So I think that early on was one of the very best decisions we made. And very different in some ways from other schools.
Yeah, and I think the thing, you know, we kept at the focal point was our people, but the students were really at the focal point for everything. You know, we're talking about our residence halls. When we were here in other institutions, shutting down residence halls and students not able to get things out of the halls till who knows when, or graduation dates. And as Grant alluded to, we made those decisions at times we thought was right for us. You know, graduation, we made that decision as late as we possibly could. But as soon as we made the decision wasn't going to happen on May 9th, then we said, okay, what does it look like possibly for us moving forward? And started having those discussions even for August. So it was, let's make a decision. And we stuck with it versus what we saw with some others that were making decisions, and then that decision got changed, and that decision got changed. And I think our communication was really good too. I think whether it's emails from us or videos, whatever the case may be, I think it allowed folks to feel like we had a good plan together. And you know, if they only knew behind closed doors, we were all trying to figure this thing out because it was something new. But when we went out with a united front and a clear message, campus-wide, of what decisions we had made and what our timelines would be, whether it was going online or how we were going to feed students, whether international students were going to be able to stay on campus, those kind of things. So it was, you know, as you look back at it, there was a lot that went into it. While a lot of times it seems like yesterday, it also seems like a lifetime ago too.
Okay.
So,
and I can visually think, you know, we have all gotten used to wearing our mask over the last year, but for that first, probably, would you say up until May or so, we were meeting and we were sitting apart. I remember meetings where there might be 15 or more of us in a room in columns trying to make decisions, and we were sitting far apart. We had people on the speaker phone, but we weren't wearing masks at that point. We had a number of people who were working from home, and then the masks became a part of our daily life and making sure that the signage was all up and everything. So it just kept evolving with every day, literally, or every hour that went on. What is the next thing that we need to do, or what is the next piece of medical advice that's coming out? So,
One of the things that I was really proud of is the way that, Scott, you and your team and the community all cared for the international students who are here. If you remember, Berea was one of the first schools to take some drastic action and basically shut down their residence halls because they were concerned they were going to be like cruise ships, and it was going to spread, and it was going to be really difficult. And thankfully that wasn't the case, but that was a huge unknown because a lot of what was coming to shore are people, or in the harbor were these ships, and they're full of the virus, as you know. And was that going to happen in our residence halls? And I'm really proud of the decision. There was a little bit of risk there, but at the same time, there weren't a lot of choices, frankly, for those students. And the way that your team really took care of them, for me, just really symbolizes who Tennessee Wesleyan is, which is we got your back. And when times are tough, we're going to be there for you. And a lot of places say that, but that was a great example of where that really came to fruition.
I think that's exactly right. Between the communication and the trust that's been built over time with students and faculty and staff, I look back and think, it was a tough road in the decision rooms, but in terms of the community, the way the faculty responded to what really, looking back, seems like an impossibility, which is to take a weekend and 2 days and move everything online. The way they responded, the way students responded, you could tell there was a lot of trust in leadership to make the right decisions, and then that was clearly communicated. And so, some of the survey work that we did to look at student perceptions and how they saw the transition, very positive, and just really appreciated, I think, the way we communicated and the fact that we were doing that with their best interests at heart. Looking back, it seems like a pretty smooth road, but I remember all the angst that went into making each one of those decisions. But you can't shortchange the amount of work and effort and attention to detail that faculty had to do to transition to the remote learning. And so I'm incredibly proud of the faculty at Tennessee Wesleyan because they did that under duress, and then the students' feedback, by and large, was very positive, and they felt taken care of. I think that was mirrored in the staff. I think the students felt taken care of. So
I would
looking back, I
mirror
think it
that
went
from
well.
the staff side because, many started working from home and we went to Teams. I don't remember the date, but it's hard to remember when we didn't use Teams at the moment for everything from our office phone calls to video, just chatting with each other. It became such a great tool that IT helped set up, but our offices worked from home and still dealt with the students from their needs and being able to help them. And then I think of how from admissions through Scott's team leading the way, doing online orientations when we didn't know exactly how we were going to do that, and still manage to get students involved and in touch and so forth. But it was a day-to-day, how do we do this? This didn't work quite right this time, so how do we make a change? So I think it's, and I feel like I've expressed this before, it's just the initiative and the willingness to work together that I think has been, for me, a shining star across all of our community.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how prepared the university was also in terms of technology. We were, I think, perfectly positioned to respond. And I look back and think 5, 6, 7 years ago, we may not have been positioned in that way. So, having all of our courses in a learning management system, having Teams and Big Blue Button at the ready, and just the technology and the way that faculty had learned how to use it made that transition much more possible in a quick turnaround than if we hadn't been prepared. So real kudos to our IT staff and sort of looking to the future and making sure that we were positioned to not to respond to a pandemic. I don't think any of us expected that, but to be able to be flexible in terms of how we deliver content.
Yeah, and I think some of the unsung heroes on campus, we've talked about faculty and staff and students and those kind of things, but I think some of the groups that we forget about, when we were able to keep the residence halls open because our food service team stayed here in the trenches, and they rolled with the punches and started providing to-go plates for people that maybe weren't comfortable. They had ways that we could do things with buckets and meal plans and those kind of things. And our facilities team, going finding technology with the iWaves and bioprotectants that allowed us to comfortably communicate, and all that happened. If you, as we were sitting here talking, I look back and go, okay, March 1st or so, like I said, I was in Nicaragua. We come back. We have a discussion on Monday after spring break, and we're thinking, okay, we might be heading in this direction. Well, by Friday, we made the decision we're going online. 2 weeks later, we wait a weekend and 2 days, and we're online. A couple weeks later, we're having discussions about graduation and what does the residence halls look like, and then we're into discussions. We no more make those decisions, and we're on online registrations, and then what does fall look like, and we have these plans. So if you think about a 2-month period, all that went on. And I think, Grant, your points, none of us knew we were dealing with a pandemic. We kept thinking 14 days to flatten the curve. That was the message we kept hearing. And we're thinking, all right, we're in this.
We'll try to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah, we were thinking, but by the time I think, probably a week and a half after we made the decision and made some communication, we realized we were going to have to go online for the rest of the semester as this thing was really starting to. I think I heard on the news this morning that Hamilton County had their first COVID case today, 1 year ago today. And so I think that was about the time that we in Tennessee realized, hey, this thing is close to home. It wasn't in California or New York. New York was sort of blowing up at that point with numbers. But when you think about all the decisions that had to be made and everybody sort of adjusting on a dime to make things happen, those teams like facilities and food service, we couldn't have done it without them. For me, Kelly Seekins has been a blessing throughout this school year because, Donnie's not with us today, but, to think about all the impact the athletics was going to have, and we shut down entire programs, seasons were over, and even our high school kids were already, even the kids we were recruiting, they were still going through that. And you think about all those emotions, it's amazing to look back just that short period and all that had to be done to make it happen. So
that's right.
As you think about the future of the institution, what do you all see as kind of the silver linings? For me, one of them is just a reminder of how strong the community is and how much we can't take that for granted, right? So we came together, we did something that was pretty that required all of us to help and take care of each other. But you can't take that for granted. You got to maintain that. You got to continue to hold that up and look for opportunities when people are hurting or having difficulty and all of that, which has been part of who we are for a long time. But what do you all see as some of the silver linings from your own experience?
I'm happy to start on that one because there's a lot of them from the academic side. I think some of the ways in which you can deliver academic content today really were a tough sell to some faculty who value the in-seat experience and the personal connection you have in the classroom. And I think a lot of our faculty have realized that there are distinct advantages to, say, flipping a classroom or putting some content online, but then coming back and having the in-person experience to be able to reflect on that. So I think that's one, the additional technology that we've been able to purchase has really allowed us to expand the smart classrooms on campus. I just think that moving forward, as we continue to undergird faculty with professional development, I think we've had a few converts, if you will, to thinking outside of the traditional classroom experience. So I think that's going to be a real part of Tennessee Wesleyan's future.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that, and I think not only the community on our campus, but the community around us in this area has shown their love and support. We've seen that with our students, but I think we've seen that across the board, and it just is a good reminder of what this campus means to this community and to East Tennessee. And sometimes we can forget that because we kind of become, I know I've called it a little village inside Athens, because it's easy to forget there's a city around you. And we're just all part of something a little bit bigger than ourselves. And we need to remember that a little bit more often, I think.
Yeah, my hope is that we've developed a sense of appreciation for one another. You know, and that the day the mask can be set aside will be a great day, because it's, you know, for me, it's as you're watching students and we look at our residence halls, our resident hall populations didn't go down. So I think that's a testament to the work our admissions team did, but I think it's also a testament to our communication and that preparedness, that people had a faith and confidence in us, because this would have easily been one of those years where all of a sudden we saw huge dips, but instead we found ways to come together. And but I do look forward to the day that I know our first year students from something other than their eyes up, you know, because there's students we haven't seen full feature. You know, they couldn't pick me outside of a TW mask and a bald head on campus. They don't know that they would know me somewhere else. So my hope is that we can have a deeper appreciation for one another and the things that we took for granted prior. You know, just being able to go to athletic events, being able to see theater, being able to you know, sit next to one another and work in small groups in classes or even our meetings. So I think for me, that'll be one of the silver linings, that once we can get back, and one of the things we can take forward, that the Bulldog family and the Bulldog pride that we preach is really alive and true. It's not just words or a picture on the wall or things we put in recruitment materials, but it's a testament really to who we are. We've seen that in practice in its deepest sense for the last year, not on the everyday that we normally see, but.
I have a deeper appreciation for the gatherings, like what you were saying, whether it's convocations, chapel, all those things where we come together as a community. Even commencement was at risk at one point, and we delayed it and we worked it out. But if you think about when you take all that away, you're just a kind of a small commuter college doing classes, and that's it. But all that other is so enriching and so important to the life of the institution, but to the learning environment. It's our ability to interact and challenge and just have social time together. And that's been fairly restricted this whole year. And some might not think that that's a big deal, but I think it's a tremendous deal. And it's not as much fun, frankly, to be a part of the community when you can't connect with people in the same way. And you're all doing it Zoom or Teams or that kind of thing. It's just not the same, whether it's a faculty meeting or staff meeting or convocation or chapel, whatever it might be. So looking forward to getting back to being able to do that safely, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I also think about the future is that as the leadership at Tennessee Wesleyan, we just want to continue to foster that trust. I feel like that there has been a lot of trust that we were going to do the right thing. I've said this before, but I truly appreciate the way that you, Dr. Knowles, said early in the summer, we're going to do everything we can do to keep our population safe. And I think we really did that. I mean, with the exception of the testing, which was very difficult, very challenging to figure out how you test your population frequently enough to make a real difference. I think we employed everything in the arsenal, and I think a lot of people on campus appreciate that approach, which was not a cavalier approach. You know, it wasn't, we're coming back at all costs, and you know, we're just going to try to live through it. It was a very all-in approach to taking care of our folks, and if we can continue that. And our community continues to trust that those are the ways we make decisions, I think the future is bright.
Yeah, and even though we didn't have the mass testing, you know, in August, we were thankfully, due to some local partners, Dr. Breeden's office in particular, we were able to have things in place. You know, the fact that the CARES Act money came in, some grants that Gail and Blake and his team found. We were able to put some things in place that throughout the semester we were able to do. And, you know, you talk about trust, you know, the faculty did a great job, because they're getting these emails from me. Sometimes certain faculty may have got 5 emails within an hour from me, letting them know that students were in quarantine, and they never questioned why. They never asked the dates. They sort of accepted our protocol and had trust that I was going to give them that information. And even in some cases said, "Hey, Scott, I heard about this. Did you know about this?" And so there was a great line of communication going back and forth to keep us there. Coaches did a great job, and the students did too. Students, if they were remotely symptomatic, they were reaching out and asking for guidance on how do we handle this situation, what do I do next, and so the fact that we were able to put those things together, our partners at Fort Sanders donating everything from face shields to help us out a little bit to touchless thermometers. When you look around, the communication and the effort was much bigger than just those of us around the table. But because of our relationships, we were able to make some things happen that even we were uncertain if we could pull it off. And then to be able to do mass testing in January and bring that peace of mind back, because when we all left at Christmas time, those numbers were really spiking throughout the country. We were uncertain about Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's was a big concern for faculty. And to be able to come back and test almost 600 folks and only have 6 cases, I think brought a calmness. Grant and I talked about it several times. It just brought a different level of calmness to start back up the semester. And, and as rough as not having spring break last week was, or 2 weeks ago now, for students, I truly believed it was the right decision, particularly in light of where we made that decision in October, to make those calendar adjustments and things, because again, we just didn't know where things were going to be, and the fact that we maybe are on the downhill side of this thing and numbers are encouraging. It's, I think, making those decisions based on the information we had at the time. Just let people know we hadn't stopped thinking. We continued to look and what the spring looked like, even though we just opened the summer. The fall semester. The folks knew that we were looking and thinking and making adjustments on the fly as we needed to.
Sure.
Well, I'm
Anything?
thankful.
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Well, I was going to say, I'm thankful for all we did to be able, I think it meant a lot to our students to be here, to be able to be in class, but if they were in quarantine or they or a family member had a reason they couldn't be in class, we could accommodate that. And when I'm still reading about schools who haven't had hardly any in-person classes for the last year, then I'm just extremely thankful for, it took everyone on this campus to be able to do that. It wasn't, Dr. Knowles has provided tons of leadership, and without that, we all wouldn't have been able to follow what we needed to do and feel like we were supported in it. But it took every single person, every student, every facility, food worker, staff, faculty. If we had not worked together, we would still be one of those schools who aren't in seat and aren't being able to be together. So we've been fortunate, very fortunate, but there's been a lot of hard work to have that fortune.
Well, Scott, you mentioned our facilities and food service folks, and I just underscore that. You think about they were the frontline people every single day, particularly the food service, right on the line, actually serving food, have to make all those adjustments themselves. And without one complaint and with a smile on their face. We couldn't see the smile, but it was because it was behind a mask.
Read the eyes.
And our facilities team, the whole idea that they would spray every interior space here and at our other sites, and to do that multiple times in a year. Can you imagine what that's like? And they did it for us so that we could be in seat and be safe.
And all of the heat and air units, you have no idea until you start talking to facilities how many are on this campus, and they literally have touched and put the eye wave. And essentially, I think almost everyone, I'm sure there's just a few here and there, but I think many of us commented that not only did that help from COVID, but I think it helped a lot of allergies on our campus. So I think it's something that we're going to see long-lasting effects. But Scott mentioned that earlier. They got in front of it and found that technology and said, hey, can you help us figure out how to get this and how to get it installed.
Well, and having great
So-
partners, we couldn't have done that, without national, the organization or Aramark knowing their procedures, Follett making adjustments. So having partners that aren't just invested in what they do for a living, but invested in schools and keeping operations, together. And because each one of those schools were doing something different. Aramark at one institution, almost shut down everything because there was no students there. For us, we were full on, but we now have to-go plates, and they were helping us with students that had to quarantine on campus, making sure meals got delivered. Follett, in some cases, everything was online. For us, we kept it in store. So the companies themselves, modified themselves and their operations to tailor to the schools. And I think that helped us be successful, that students could still have those personal touches, with some modifications. I'm ready for the soft serve ice cream to come back in the dining hall personally, but but we all understand sort of the protocol and what we're dealing with, and but they've continued to try to make those adjustments as the guidelines from the CDC or the state have changed, and we all know that it seems like they're changing, not quite as frequent now, but at least from June to December, it seemed like they were changing about every other week. By the time we update our protocol, we were modifying our protocol.
Right.
So,
One of the things I'm really sad about, though, in this whole thing, and I think we did a great job, and it was a team effort, clearly, is that these seniors who will never get their senior year back. You hear it from high schools, but also college students. Imagine somebody who's expecting to have their best basketball season ever. They've worked their whole life to kind of do this, and to have the full college experience in and out of the classroom, and all that changed in this last year, and it'll always be that way, and that's really a shame. But again, people had to make adjustments, and they did, and they did it for the most part with a smile on their face, and learn some other things. Perhaps maybe they didn't learn some of the things that we anticipated because we couldn't be together quite as much. But I think particularly about the women's basketball team, who went into quarantine 3 times and couldn't even go to the conference tournament, and that was a real goal, obviously, that they had. And so, while we, I think, learned a lot of things and a lot of positive things, I think there is a little bit of heartbreak too, and we'll always remember the COVID year. And for sure, and particularly the folks who are graduating this year.
well, I remember the struggle the 3 of us had, for December graduation. We were, all on board, and we made a plan, and then we I think Wednesday, before we communicated on Tuesday, our plan is to still go, and the numbers just skyrocketed that week, and we belabored it, and finally said we had to make that call on Wednesday and had to go to virtual. And for us, that's one of our culminating events, at least for me. It's one of the highlights of my year is that graduation event, and to not be able to see parents for the first time ever in my higher ed career, not have parents sitting around celebrating their graduate. That was, but our graduates rolled with it. I saw folks posting on Facebook, they were watching the live stream. Our marketing team did a great way, marketing communications team did a great job getting that online, so folks that couldn't be here, both in August and in December, could celebrate. And I saw families posting on Facebook celebrating their, so it was one of those that we still were able to do it. And while it was modified, it wasn't completely just showing the name on a screen.
Right.
We actually had the graduates walking across, and they were able to receive that degree from you and that picture from you at both of those ceremonies. But man, that was one of the toughest decisions I think I can recall during this entire thing, because it's such a milestone and something, that students love to celebrate, and they've worked for those 4 or 5 years.
One of the things that was consistent about this whole thing is you never knew what was on the other side. Because we hadn't been there. I think you said that before, Gail, is that every decision you made in somewhat of a vacuum, because you had no experience to draw upon. So you were kind of looking into the future, knowing that if it was a bad decision like that one, for example, because nobody wants to have a super spreader and all of that. So again, just a lot of unknowns and coping with those. And that wasn't just one decision, that was nearly every decision was like that, without a lot of evidence to tell you what was the right thing to do.
Yeah, before we started the fall, I remember there was, some wagering, not not wagering money, but just wagering on how many weeks we would be in seat. I don't know that any of us felt like we would be in seat for the entirety of the fall. And that just speaks to the uncertainty that there was out there. And so we watched, and if we had seen any spread, in the academic setting, or identified it, I think, in the dining hall, or identified these pockets, we likely would have said, we're going remote. And so that uncertainty was always there, every decision. But I think the students, even the seniors last year who graduated, expressed their appreciation that we didn't make a knee-jerk reaction. The fact that we postponed commencement and did a commencement outside in August. So many students expressed how much they appreciated that, because they did get to experience it. And they saw the contrast with some other institutions who simply canceled all of those events. So I think the students have responded in that way, even though it's really challenging. I think this may be the most resilient bunch of college graduates that have been produced in quite some time, because they've pivoted and survived and lived through a complicated time, and yet they still managed to get through it and get through the requirements to graduate.
And I think we underestimate those guys, because they, when you talk about that, I don't think any of us anticipated that we'd get through fall break, or what would have typically been fall break. I think most of us said, if we can get through end of September, we're going to be doing good.
Mine was 5 weeks.
I had it still fall break, but I was that cautious optimistic. But it was one of those that I think the way that, when we talk about the resiliency of students and how our students respond, wearing masks and social distancing, I was thinking, Holly, how's life going to be in the residence halls? How's life going to be in the dining hall? How is it going to be in columns? We social distance in the classroom, so we sort of took that out of their hands. But they've wore the mask when we've asked them to quarantine because of contact tracing. I think I was looking at the numbers this morning before I came over, and we've had 700 students in total, so it could be duplicate head count, that have had to be put in quarantine or isolation over the course of the year. And I think I've had probably 5, maybe, that really were frustrated about that, because they didn't feel that they were maybe a close contact. But the fact that they responded with our instructions and our directive is what allowed us to be blessed, with our faculty making sure folks were wearing masks in classrooms. So when you look at those little pieces, that resiliency and that cooperation, I don't think we can echo to students enough, because we were listening to schools, just before this meeting, Dr. Knowles and I were talking about a major university, that's closed down again just today, and put a standstill. But the fact that our students, for the most part, yielded to our request and aided, it allowed us to continue to operate. And we couldn't have done it without their cooperation during that 10 months, 11 months at this point. I guess 12 now if we go all the way back.
Remember, even over Christmas, and we were coming back, if my memory is correct, many schools were delaying that start because of the Christmas and the numbers. And we went ahead and started on time. And I think that was, we have faith, we've got testing, we're going to do this. But that was a faith call, really and truly, of can we do this and can we get them back? And I kind of had a feeling that we all felt, if we can do that, we can stay here. But we have to get over that. And not to interject kind of a sad note, but I think it would be remiss if we don't remember that we may not know who they are, but there are probably students and others on this campus who have lost family, friends during this time. So I think we need to make sure we remember them.
And it's not just folks who have suffered from the disease, but folks who passed in nursing homes and hospitals and others from other illnesses, but their family couldn't be with them. I lost a few, and many of us have. This has just been a really trying time, and that's we all need to keep them in our thoughts and prayers for sure.
But the sun's shining, and it looks like the world is getting in a little bit of a better place. So I'm hopeful. I'm sure most of our summer classes will be online. They normally are, but I'm feeling kind of positive that these masks may be going away, or we may be able to be closer together as more of us get vaccinated, or sit in line to be vaccinated as I did Saturday. Didn't quite make it before the cutoff, but I tried. So.
Well, I think as we look back, I think the things to remember are, we've talked about on-campus folks, but even our frontline folks out in the community, our first responders, folks nursing, nurses, all those folks, and there's too many to list, but I mean, when you look at grocery stores and some of the abuse some of those folks took, over toilet paper, who would, when we all sort of joked about that, and but it's we tend to, we focused here, but those groups made some things continue to operate and keep things functioning society-wise, and so I think as we reflect back, we just got to make sure we give that appreciation to the folks that did these studies. I know there's people that have their conspiracy theories, and Grant and I had several conversations earlier. I'm like, Grant, this thing's the flu, man. This, and he's like, Scott, this is a little bit more. Let me explain to you why it's a little bit more.
The scientists came out
because at that point when we were starting to look at it, being the non-scientist guy, I'm like, it's the flu. This is what people are saying. And he's like, no, this is a little bit more, and here's the rhyme and reason. Well, once you had some voice of reasons to be able to give you some insight, you could take a step back and look at those kind of things. And, Lisa Kirkland, our professor, is one of those that was that way. She said, Scott, look, here's the things. And, we forget about those campuses, and Robert and his team that they were functioning. They're in the hospital settings. And so, so again, I think if we can remember all the folks that kept America sort of going when the rest of us were dealing with, working remotely from home, or our children being at home, and however that may have or may not have worn on us during those time periods.
And I think, those very people also, in many cases, are our student population, especially in this community. And so I think we've got a job to do moving forward, just to make sure that we attend to the lasting effects. Because I think we all agree there will be some lasting effects from the pandemic, even when we can take the masks off. And how do we support our students, and how do we make sure that they come out of this stronger mentally and emotionally and socially, given what they've had to live through.
Yeah, I worry about the results. I see it, we've been fortunate with our grandchildren, but I worry about those kids who are young, very young now, because this has been a totally different occasion. So
we call them future bulldogs.
The future bulldogs, that's it. So because it really, their education and things is totally disrupted it in many ways. And I don't think we're going to know for quite some period of time how, even with ourselves, I think we're all still feeling the effect, but how will the children continue?
Kind of along those same lines, I worry about how it'll affect professions and careers. You think about educators, nurses, other frontline people who may be on the front line and susceptible to some other viruses or variants in the future. How is our life going to be different if this is what we have to deal with over and over in our world? So those frontline careers could be very, very different as a result. And maybe we use technology more. I don't know. And there's some efficiencies and good things about that. But what's missing is the opportunity to really connect with people. And that's the thing I've missed here. And I think a lot of educators have really struggled with that we've, particularly if they weren't in seat as much as we were. So.